Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taya and this is Taya's Turning Pages. So by the title of today's video, you can tell that this is going to be my December wrap up, and this was an interesting reading month. I will say that. This was very interesting. I feel like everything that I planned out for December in terms of my ambitious TBR was a flop, like a true flop, floppy on all the way around, because I had a full-on DNF and then I had a soft DNF, and then I just had some books that I picked up that I just really wasn't interested in reading anymore. But then towards the end of the month, things took a turn and my reading month got better. So I don't know, this is just a roller coaster of a reading month for me, and honestly very on brand for 2022 and just a great send-off to 2022, because that truly encapsulates what my year was like. Just a roller coaster. But regardless, I was just really happy that I was able to read books this month, and I discovered some new favorites, so that's always a win in my book. As always, I'm going to start with the lowest rated books of the month and then work my way up to the highest rated books of the month. But before we get into that, I did just quickly want to talk about two books, because I was supposed to read both of these books, or at least one of them, in December, and that just did not happen. So the two books that I'm referring to are Twilight by Stephanie Myers and From Luke Off with Love by Mariana Zapata. So starting with Twilight, I have talked about this book extensively on my channel. Just know that I will be reading this in January. The second book here is From Luke Off with Love, like I said, and this is a book that I knew I probably wasn't going to get to in December just because of the length of it and just because I had other books that I wanted to read, but I was still really hoping that I could get to this in December. Unfortunately, that did not happen. Just know that this book is going to be a 2023 TBR floater, meaning that it could end up on any of my TBRs throughout the year. I'm not going to show this book anymore until I either film a reading vlog and or film a wrap up with this book included. Okay, so with all of that out of the way, let's actually get into the books that I DNF'd and read this month. So the first book that I have here that isn't even rated because I did DNF it is Bunny by Mona Awad. So y'all cannot be serious with this book. Before I even get into my thoughts on this book and why I just could not finish it, I will just give a brief synopsis. So on the back here it says, a scholarship student who prefers the company of her dark imagination to that of most people, Samantha Heather Mackey is utterly repelled by the rest of her graduate fiction writing cohort at New England's elite Warren University, a clique of unbearably saccharine yet sinister rich girls who call each other Bunny and seem to move and speak as one. But everything changes when Samantha receives an invite to the Bunny's fabled smut salon, inexplicably drawn to their front door, ditching her only friend Ava in the process. As Samantha plunges deeper and deeper into the Bunny's world and begins to take part in their monstrous experiments, the edges of reality begin to blur. Soon her friendships with Ava and the Bunnies will be brought into deadly collision. So honestly, I'm really not going to spend that much time on this book, y'all, because like I said, I did DNF it. I only got through 40% of this book, and I'm surprised I even lasted that long. There's just so much going on with this plot, and it just felt messy. It felt messy, it felt chaotic, and not in the good way, at least not for me. I know a lot of people love Bunny. I know that this is a lot of people's favorite book. After reading Goodreads reviews and like really trying to wrap my head around what the fuck I just read, I understand why people liked it and why it is a favorite for so many different people, but for me personally, I just did not vibe with it at all. I really did not like the main character, which is saying a lot because usually I like the main characters 90% of the time, and with the other 10%, even if they are an unlikable MC, I still end up finding something about them that I like that keeps me interested and engaged throughout the story. But I did not find anything interesting or intriguing about Samantha. I'm sorry, she just was not my favorite character. There were just certain things about her that just rubbed me the wrong way. Of course, did not like the way that she just like ditched Ava, even though Ava wasn't my favorite character either. Like honestly, everybody in the story was a hot ass mess, but like I just did not like a lot of the things that Samantha did and said. She was one of those people that I just felt like would say one thing and then do another, especially at the expense of her real friends. Hey y'all, editing me popping in here, I know a mess, please ignore. But I really had to pop in here and just expand on my thoughts a little bit more on Samantha's character and what she did that like really irritated me besides what I already said. So going off of my earlier point, I really don't like when people say one thing and do another, yes, but when it came to Samantha in particular, I just felt like she never stood 10 toes down in her opinion on the Bunnies. Like one minute she's over here talking shit about them constantly, like it's giving obsession, the way that she would always talk about them and always watch them, always trying to see what they're talking about, what they're getting up to. But as soon as they even breathed or looked in her direction, she was willing to drop everything and run and be a part of their group. And it's like, girl, no, stand 10 toes down in your opinion. You either like them or you don't. You either want to be their friend or you don't. So I just did not like how she was just all flip-floppy and just all over the place. Like her character really irritated the hell out of me, like for real. And usually I don't go on and on and on about characters like this, but something about her just did not sit right with my spirit. And so I just had to come on here and say that because I did not include that in my original like clips, but I was just thinking about it as I was editing this video. So yeah, going back to my point of this just being chaotic and not in a good way, the writing. I just could not get on board with just how stream of consciousness and how erratic this writing was. I understand that these are the type of books and the type of writing you're going to get with these unhinged women books, but I just feel like the ones that I have read that I could possibly compare this to just did it better. I don't know. I've only read one other unhinged woman storybook in full, and it was My Year of Rest and Relaxation by Otessa Moshfegh. I'm not saying that that book is perfect, but I did enjoy that one and that reading experience a lot more than I enjoyed this one. I just felt like there was a lot of nonsensical things happening and I just couldn't get on board with it. I understand now like the larger message of what this story was trying to convey since I went on Goodreads to read everybody's reviews, but sometimes I don't feel like going on Goodreads or going on Google to figure out what a book actually meant after I read it or once I get to a certain point. I just felt like I was completely lost and confused throughout most of the story. That could be a me thing. I know a lot of people really enjoy the story, but this one just wasn't for me. The one thing that I will say that I did enjoy is the very minute, and I mean very, very minute, comparisons and similarities from this friend group to the Heathers. The Heathers is one of my favorite movies. I love a good Mean Girl movie. Heathers is the OG, of course. And so I did like the very, very small parallels between the two groups. But other than that, nothing redeeming about the story for me personally. And the next book that I have here is technically another DNF, but it's a soft DNF because I do plan on picking it back up sometime this year, and it is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Malors. So let me just preface to say that I am really enjoying this story. I did not DNF this or soft DNF this because I'm not enjoying it. I just had to put this book down because there is a lot going on and it is really heavy and emotional. Honestly, I could have figured that by the cover and even by the synopsis. I knew that this was going to have a lot of different storylines and it was going to take our group of characters into different directions, but I just like wasn't in the right headspace to read this book, and I just feel like this is the type of book that deserves my undivided clear attention because I am really enjoying this so far and I could definitely see this becoming a favorite of mine. I've actually started tabbing this quite a bit. You probably can't even see it all that well just because of my ring light, but I have tabbed this book quite a bit. So like I said, I definitely think that this is going to become a favorite of mine. It's just a matter of like, when am I going to be in the right headspace to pick it up? So this story follows a group of characters, but more specifically it follows Cleo and Frank. Cleo is actually from London, but she ends up going to the United States because she really wants to jumpstart her art career and also just be around other creatives in New York City, but her student visa is going to expire soon, and so Cleo is dealing with all of that. And then on the flip side of that, you have Frank, and Frank is considerably older than Cleo. I think he's about like 20 years older than her, but him and Cleo enter this whirlwind romance, but this romance isn't as perfect as it may seem, and the story takes off from there. So there are other subplots within this story. Like I said, this does follow a group of friends, but you really do focus more so on Cleo and Frank and what's really going on in their lives. I am on chapter 7. This book is just really heavy. To be honest, this book reminds me of Euphoria in a weird way, and just like some of the things that the characters got up to that weren't really the smartest, but they still ended up doing it anyway, and that's just how I feel about most of the characters in this book. But either way, I do plan on picking this back up at some point, and I am looking forward to getting back into it and really getting sucked into the story again. Everyone has something going on and it's just like not what you think. So yeah, that's all I can really say about this book so far. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the 4-star rated books of the month. Even though I had those DNFs, I am really happy that the rest of the reads for the month were 4 and 5 stars. So the first book that I have here is Partners in Crime by Alicia Ray. So this book, y'all, this book was camp. This book was camp. It was so much fun. So this story follows two characters, one named Mira and one named Naveen. And so Mira and Naveen are both career-driven people. Mira is actually an accountant and Naveen is a lawyer. But Mira and Naveen actually used to date, and they dated for about, I think, like 6 months or a year. Mira ended up breaking up with Naveen over text because there were some things going on with her. And so Naveen is really jaded and irritated by the fact that Mira just kind of like left him high and dry, essentially, especially without giving him any reason or any warning. And so Naveen is not over this, but he tries to move on as best as he can because he really does want to get married and settle down one day. And Mira also tries to move on and find someone else, but in the midst of all of this, Mira's aunt ends up dying. Mira's aunt's lawyer ends up contacting Mira to let her know because she does have an inheritance from her aunt that she needs to claim. And so Mira ends up going to this law office, and lo and behold, who is her aunt's lawyer? Naveen. And so the attraction between both Mira and Naveen sparks right back up. But before they can even act on this or really talk about what happened that night that Mira just broke up with him, Naveen and Mira are both kidnapped. I'm not going to get into the reasons as to why they are kidnapped, but just know they are kidnapped, and you follow Mira and Naveen throughout the story of them trying to escape and also solve a mystery along the way. And throughout this night, Mira and Naveen end up getting closer. They're obviously bonded by this shared experience and trauma, and the story takes off from there. As you can hear by that synopsis, this book is ridiculous, but I loved every single second of it. I was thoroughly entertained by this book. This is peak escapism, like in every sense of the word. We'll say that the story tied up nicely in the end and things definitely made sense, but when you're reading it and when you're in it, you just sit back and think to yourself, like, what the fuck is going on? What am I actually reading right now? I love how Naveen and Mira were able to put their differences aside for a bit to try to work together to figure out how they were going to get out of this situation, because these crime bosses were on their ass, okay? You look at this cover and you're just like, oh, this is a cute little rom-com, and it's like, no, certain things started to take a turn, and I was like, whoa, what is going on? What is Alicia Ray doing right now? This is definitely just more fun and lighthearted. Now, there are hard-hitting topics that are discussed in this book, especially pertaining to Mira and her character and her past, but for the most part, this is just a lot of fun. One thing that I will say though is that I feel like Mira's character did come off a little bit robotic at times. Like, there were certain instances in certain chapters where I just felt like she read very awkwardly, and the dialogue that she was made to say or the actions that she made just did not come off naturally, in my opinion. I felt like she was very awkward, and maybe that was the nature of her character, but I just felt like when it came to the writing of Mira's character in certain regards, especially like in the beginning of the book, I just felt like she was very awkward. All in all, I still really enjoyed her character. I liked learning more about her and her past because she had such a fascinating upbringing, and learning how that directly impacts her and Naveen's situation in this story is just, like I said, really fascinating to read about. And then the last thing that I will say that I really enjoyed about this story was the little romantic moments between Naveen and Mira. You could just tell that they were soulmates and that they were meant to be together. I just thought that certain chapters were really cute. So I can definitely see myself rereading this at some point. I'm not sure if I'm going to reread it this year, but I definitely do plan on rereading this and annotating it because, like I said, I just had a lot of fun, and this is one of those books that I feel like can really help you get out of a slump just because it's entertaining. Oh yeah, and another thing that I wanted to say is that I'm not sure if this is technically a cozy mystery with like romantic elements involved, but if it is, I am a little ashamed to say that I enjoyed a cozy mystery, just because I said to you guys in the past that I just don't really like cozy mysteries. I don't know why, it's just something about them that is a bit off to me, but this one worked. So if they are like this, then maybe I will consider picking them up in the future. Okay, so now we're going to move on to my 4.5 stars of the month, and the first book that I have here is One of Us is Dead by Geneva Rose. So I'm just going to read the synopsis for this one because there is a lot that happens in the story and I don't want to spoil anything, but right here in the flap it says, meet the woman of Buckhead, a place of expensive cars, huge houses, and competitive friendships. Shannon was once the queen bee of Buckhead, but she's been unceremoniously dumped by Bryce, her politician husband. When Bryce replaces her with a much younger woman, Shannon sets out to take revenge. Crystal has stepped into Shannon's old shoes, a young, innocent Texan girl. She simply has no idea what she's up against. Olivia has waited years to take Shannon's crown as the unofficial queen of Buckhead. Finally, her moment has come, but to take her rightful place, she will need to use every backstabbing, manipulative, underhand trick in the book. Jenny owns Glow, the most exclusive salon in town. Jenny knows all her clients' secrets and darkest desires, but will she ever tell? Who amongst these women will be clever enough to survive Buckhead, and who will wind up dead? They say that friendships can be complex, but no one said it could ever be this deadly. So as you can hear by the synopsis, this book definitely gives off major Real Housewives vibes, and I will say it's more of like a season from hell of Real Housewives, and I loved every single second of this book. It was so thrilling, so gripping, and just so hilariously entertaining that I could not put it down. Geneva Rose has a knack for writing thrillers that I feel like have complicated plots. She somehow simplifies it and makes it make sense in the end, and this book was no different, but I still found her writing very enthralling in this book, and similar to The Perfect Marriage, I felt like the story took a very dark turn, which I was not expecting, but I loved it. Like I said, the one word that I would use to describe the banter and comebacks and just like backhanded compliments that were in this book as frothy. They were frothy, and I know that that probably sounds like an odd word, but like that is the word that I would use to describe the banter and the dialogue in this book. These women were so frothy, so snarky, and so, just like I said, backhanded to one another. It was so funny reading some of the comebacks that these women would dish out to one another.
I'm not afraid at all. What's the problem? I don't understand. No problem. I'll take you all. Let's go. Come on.
Now, I'm not going to get into who my favorite characters were or who I disliked and all that because I just don't want to give anything away. Just know that these women are hilarious, and I could genuinely see them sitting with Andy Cohen at a Real Housewives reunion and just reflecting and talking about their season. If you have similar reading taste to me, then I definitely recommend picking this book up. It is so addictive, it's so fun, and I flew through this book so quickly. At this point, Geneva Rose is an auto-buy author for me. I will be picking up her new book that's coming out this year. I think it's called You Shouldn't Have Come Here. I will pop up a picture of it up on the screen, but I cannot wait until this book comes out. The next book that I have here is I Found You by Lisa Jewell. So I finally read another Lisa Jewell book, and I'm so happy that I did because this one was a hit. This is another book where I'm going to read the synopsis for because there are so many different POVs and timelines that you have to keep up with in this story. And again, I don't want to spoil anything, but on the back here it says, in the windswept British seaside town of Riding House Bay, single mom Alice Lake finds a man sitting on the beach. He has no name and no idea how he got there. Meanwhile, in a London suburb, newlywed Lily Monrose grows anxious when her husband fails to return home from work. But the police soon deliver even more disturbing news. The man she married never truly existed. 23 years earlier, Gray and Kirsty Ross are teenagers on a summer holiday with their parents. The annual trip to Riding House Bay is uneventful until an enigmatic young man starts paying extra attention to Kirsty. Something about him makes Gray uncomfortable, and it's not just because he's a protective older brother. Who is the man on the beach? Where is Lily's missing husband? And whatever happened to the man who made such a lasting impression on Gray? As you can hear from that synopsis, the story is a bit convoluted, but Lisa Jewell executed this flawlessly. She is truly the blueprint, the GOAT, when it comes to psychological thrillers. I will say that this is definitely one of her more slow burn thrillers, and this is just an overall slow burn thriller. And usually I don't like those. It really depends on the author and their writing, but Lisa Jewell is an exception. She has a fantastic way of writing obsessive and compulsive and gripping thrillers. Her writing style is truly unmatched. And I just love that with every single chapter there's something ominous about it, but you can't put your finger on what it is exactly. And so you have to keep reading and reading in order to find out what it is that's so unsettling or so ominous about that chapter or about this story. There were definitely a lot of twists and turns that I did not see coming. This story was also very sad and very heartbreaking and devastating. It actually reminded me of Then She Was Gone. If you read Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. There was just a certain type of sadness and melancholic bleakness about the story, because it definitely didn't turn out the way that I think a lot of us expected it to turn out. And so for that, I have no choice but to stand. Like, this is definitely my second favorite Lisa Jewell book right after Then She Was Gone because of how similar they are. So I definitely recommend picking this book up if you are interested in Lisa Jewell, and if you're looking to get into her books. I definitely think that this is one of those that will have you shocked and have you questioning and contemplating so many different things. But I really enjoyed this one. Now, there were things about it that had me scratching my head a little bit, so definitely make sure you suspend disbelief and logic and don't take this too seriously. But all in all, this was a great thriller and just further solidified that I'm always gonna rock with Lisa Jewell and I'm always going to read her books. I know she's coming out with a new book this year. I think it's called None of This Is True or something like that. I'll leave a picture of it up on the screen here. I didn't talk about that in my most anticipated thriller book releases of 2023 video because I forgot that it was coming out. But just know I will be getting that book as soon as it publishes, because this woman, she can do no wrong. She can do no wrong when it comes to thrillers. And the last 4.5 star rated book that I have here is All the Dangerous Things by Stacey Willingham. The story follows a woman named Isabel, and Isabel is married and has a 1-year-old son named Mason. Isabel and her husband and her son are living out the idyllic suburban life until one day Isabel and her husband's world is changed forever because Mason is actually kidnapped. Isabel hasn't been able to sleep, eat, or think properly ever since the night her son disappeared. Isabel dedicates all of her time to trying to look for her son and figure out what really happened to him. As Isabel is mulling over the night that her son was kidnapped, she starts to realize that she actually doesn't really remember all of what happened that night, and the story takes off from there. I'm not going to say anything else because this is just one of those books where you need to just pick it up and read it and sit back and enjoy the ride. This has so many different twists and turns that I truly did not see coming. And this book solidified that Stacey Willingham is an autobi author for me, and that I will be picking up all of her books because I loved this one just as much as I loved A Flicker in the Dark. And it's so interesting because the main character in here, Isabel, reminded me of Chloe so much. And for those of you who do not know, Chloe is the main character in Stacey Willingham's other book, A Flicker in the Dark. And you can tell that Stacey Willingham enjoys writing complex and nuanced and flawed female characters because both Chloe and Isabel have a lot going on in their personal lives, and they're battling a lot of different things that they experienced in their past. And Isabel's childhood in particular was just so disturbing and so unsettling. It really shaped her into the character that we come to know in this story. There were so many different moments where I liked Isabel, and then there were other moments where I couldn't stand her, and then there were other moments where I did like her again, but I couldn't fully trust her because she wasn't telling us the full story. There were so many different times where she was so unreliable that you couldn't decipher what was real and what was all in her head. And I just love that. You guys know I love a good unreliable narrator, and Isabel delivered on that front. So I just really like peeling back the layers of her and really getting to know more about her and why she was the way that she was, and also just trying to get to the bottom of what really happened to her son. And so besides the thrilling parts, this story does have a lot of commentary on motherhood and what it means to be a perfect mother or a good mother, and how far would you go for your child. This also had a lot of commentary on the true crime community. I have talked about this before on my channel, but I do consume true crime content. I listen to different podcasts, and I also am subscribed to different true crime YouTubers. I'm not going to get into all of them right now. I will leave the names of those that I watch in my description box below because I feel like they all do a great job at really keeping the victim at the forefront of their storytelling and like the way that they talk about cases versus other true crime YouTubers and TikTokers. But anyways, Stacey Willingham does not hold back on the commentary on the true crime community and just how out of control the community has gotten when it comes to certain things. There are talks about internet sleuths and just how sometimes that can be more harmful than it is helpful. It also talks about how victims and the victims' families have to essentially exploit themselves and exploit the case in order to even get attention shined on their loved one or on the victim in general, just so that way their case can be solved or so that way they can be found. And it's just really heartbreaking and eye-opening when you think about it, just because a lot of us consume this type of content, but these are real people. You know, these are real people that went through some of the most horrific and unimaginable things that someone should not have to go through in their lifetime. I don't watch true crime for like pure entertainment. That's literally not why I watch it. At least that's not why I think I watch it. I genuinely watch it to just be informed on what's going on in the world, but also just trying to make sure I stay safe and vigilant myself, and making sure that like I have these cases in the back of my mind, because unfortunately bad things happen in this world and there are people out here that don't have your best interests at heart, and you have to keep yourself safe. But also to just take time out of my day to remember someone. Even though I do not know these people personally, they were still real people and they were still here, and they deserve to have their story told. I know that there are some people that watch it for entertainment purposes. For me personally, like that's not really why I like to watch it. But anyways, I just went on a whole tangent. I just really like the commentary on all of the different things that I mentioned, but specifically the true crime community, because it's a great reminder for all of us to just like understand that, hey, these are real people with real families and they're trying to get justice for their loved one, and like we need to be respectful and tasteful when it comes to this. All in all, really enjoyed this. I love the writing. Stacey Willingham's prose is so beautiful, and it's just as good in this one as it was in A Flicker in the Dark. So if you love lyrical, slow burn, mystery / thriller books, then I definitely think that Stacey Willingham is an author that you should check out. Now we're moving on to the 5 stars of the month. First book that I have here, I'm actually just going to get out of the way because I already have an entire reading blog on it, but it is Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. So I have an entire reading blog on this, like I said. I also talked about this in my top 22 books of 2022 video, so definitely make sure you check those out. I will say that the reading blog for this does contain spoilers, so just keep that in mind, but I will give you a synopsis and my brief thoughts on this book, just in case you haven't read this book yet and you plan on doing it, you don't want to get spoiled. So this story follows a divorced couple. The woman's name is Yasmin and the man's name is Josiah. Yasmin and Josiah were college sweethearts, and they were also madly in love, and they ended up getting married, having kids, and then also they became co-owners of a restaurant called Grits, and things were going great for them until one day it wasn't. Yasmin, Josiah, and just their entire family ended up suffering 2 devastating losses back to back, and this unfortunately led to the demise of Yasmin and Josiah's marriage. So in this story you follow Yasmin and Josiah's journey to healing, so like self-healing, but also finding their way back to one another. It's heartbreaking, devastating, and just overall heart-wrenching in every sense of the word, but it was also beautiful because you really got to see the love that these 2 characters have for one another. And even though that love was buried deep underneath all of this pain and hurt and trauma, you can tell that they still really loved each other and wanted nothing but the best for one another. And I just absolutely adore the story. I can't say enough great things about it. I can't recommend it enough. So I definitely recommend picking this book up if you can handle the triggers, specifically the death of a child / a stillbirth, and dealing with the trauma and the aftermath of that, as well as just dealing with the aftermath of a divorce and just severe depression, self-harm type of thoughts, etc. As you can see here, I tabbed this book up so much because there were so many different quotes and so many different phrases and sentences that the characters said that I related to so much, and I just feel like this is one of those stories that a lot of people can resonate with, because I feel like we all have ebbs and flows with our mental health. And so there are just so many moments with Yasmin in particular where she talks about her mental health and depression and anxiety and all of those type of things. We are finally on our last book, our last 5-star book of the month, and it is Always and Forever. So yes, I have another Beverly Jenkins book that made its way into my 5-star ratings, and are you surprised? Because I'm not. So this story follows 2 characters, a woman named Grace and a woman named Jackson. So starting with Grace, Grace is very straight-laced, very proper, and very buttoned up, and so she hasn't really experienced life or really lived. She hasn't really been in a relationship or anything like that. She is really focused on her career and just making sure she keeps her father's business afloat. He handed the business down to Grace. So Grace is actually a banker, which is actually huge, especially for this time period, because Grace is a woman, but more specifically a Black woman. woman, and that was just unheard of during this time. And so Grace is really good at what she does. She's really good with numbers, but there are some clients of hers that do try to take advantage of her or bully her just because she is a woman, but Grace doesn't let that get to her. She's very strong-willed and she knows exactly what she's doing. And then on the flip side of that, you have her love interest in Jackson. And Jackson used to be a deputy marshal, I'm pretty sure, but something happened, and so now he's on the run and he's technically an outlaw. And so him and Grace couldn't really be like any more different in that regard. Jackson ends up coming to the town that Grace lives in because he does plan on helping Grace out with this specific task. And Grace's cousin asked her could she find any women that live in her town that were willing to travel all the way to Kansas to marry the men that are in her cousin's town. Long story, we're not going to get into it, but Grace does get interest from women who do want to leave the town that they live in to go marry these men in Kansas. So essentially these women are technically mail order brides. And so Jackson, Grace, and these brides end up traveling to Kansas in this wagon. You pretty much just follow their journey of them traveling to Kansas and dealing with all of the hardships that come along with that, but also reading about these two falling in love along the way. So I hope that synopsis made sense because there is a lot going on with this story, but I still loved it nonetheless. It was so sweet, so charming, and so passionate. Oh my goodness, there were so many different steamy scenes between Jackson and Grace that I was like, whoa, okay, like this is the route that we're going, and that is the route that we went. I loved every single second of this book. I just thought that Jackson was a great book boyfriend, and I just loved how he was so tender and caring and sweet when it came to Grace in certain moments. Now these two definitely had a lot of strong opinions and they butted heads a lot. There was so much tension and angst between these two. When they had their vulnerable moments, it was so sweet to read about because you know that they are normally not like that. So when they did get like that, it just made it even more charming and heartfelt, and I just loved it. And Grace, I loved her character too. All of Beverly Jenkins' female characters all follow the same archetype where they are very strong-willed, very determined, and they really don't let men push them around. And so of course I loved her, and I loved how she was always challenging Jackson and didn't back down from him. Even though she was a banker, she still got down and dirty and still did what she had to do in order to make sure they all got to Kansas safely. Going off of that a little bit more, I mentioned in other videos that Beverly Jenkins does a great job with incorporating Black history and like little known / unknown Black history in her historical romances. And this book really spoke to Black folks in traveling, especially back in the 1800s. And I just couldn't imagine going through something like this. Grace and Jackson had no choice really but to take this wagon to Kansas instead of getting on the train because of Jim Crow. So there were a lot of discussions on if you were Black and you wanted to get on a train to go somewhere, there was a risk that you could potentially be either kicked off of the train and left stranded, or sit in the back of the train where it was like really dirty, and I think there was like cattle and like animals and things like that. And so it was just like really infuriating to read about that, but it was also very eye-opening and very informative. And I just like that Beverly Jenkins always goes the extra mile and incorporates that type of history because it's needed and a lot of us don't know about this. And so I just really like that aspect of the book. As infuriating as it was so interesting to learn about, and it definitely put things into perspective for me and made me understand like even more like why this journey for Grace and Jackson was just so crucial, but it was also very dangerous. Obviously I'm not going to get into all of the different things that happened. There was some trouble that they ran into along the way when they were traveling in the wagon, so it's not like the wagon was all rainbows and sunshines. There were so many different things that they had to endure and go through that people should not have to go through. So I just had to like quickly call that out because that stuck out to me a lot. And another thing that this book reiterated to me is that I really love strangers and or enemies / rivals to lovers stories so much more than I like friends to lovers. I really don't understand how you guys like friends to lovers. Like I'm genuinely trying to figure out how y'all can sit there and read a friends to lovers book and not get bored. Oh my goodness, there's only one friends to lovers book that I genuinely enjoyed, and that was Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey. I have not read a friends to lovers book that I have liked since then. I just feel like it's so boring. Also, I just feel like I can never fully get connected to the characters in that way. The main characters already know each other and they already have that history and that background, and they already learned everything about the other. We as the reader don't fully get to know those characters or fully get to know what makes them tick or what makes the other one tick, etc., because they already know each other, and like all of that stuff was off page. Whereas this is a true like get to know situation because Grace and Jackson had nothing but time during this wagon journey, and so they really got to learn each other, and it just made them and their story so much more compelling and really fleshed them out and gave them more dimension than I feel like a lot of friends to lovers stories do. I'm sorry, that's just how I personally feel, because I read another one of Beverly Jenkins' books and it's called Jewel, and that's a friends to lovers, and I just did not feel connected to them at all. I didn't. I liked them enough, but I just did not care about them as much as I cared about these two. And so this just solidified that I need to read books where the characters are virtually strangers, or they have a lot of animosity and hostility towards one another, that they didn't care to get to know one another. These are the type of tropes that I look for and that I like in books, and that no one will ever make me feel bad for liking enemies to lovers. Okay? Like I need that tension tension, I need that angst, and that's exactly what I got with this book. And it was just so good. It was so passionate, so steamy, and just so sweet and heartfelt. All right, y'all, and those are all of the books that I read for the month of December. As you can see, I had a chaotic reading month, and it did not turn out the way that I thought it would have at all, but I am happy that I at least finished out December and the year strong. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Definitely make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me my channel out. And lastly, please make sure you follow me on Bookstagram as well as Storygraph. I will leave all of that information linked down below, as well as at the end of the video like I always do. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.